No. Ah, yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome along to another Sentient Rights Ireland session. I have a special guest today, been around the block a little bit, like some of us, Jordi. So would you like to introduce yourself and proceed, please?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Jordi Casamitjana. As I know is a difficult name to pronounce for many people. That's because I was born in Catalonia many decades ago, but I've been in the UK for more than 30 years. So I'm a British citizen now, but I still have the accent and still have the name, and that's how it is. I'm a zoologist. I've been involved in animal protection all my life. I studied zoology back there in Catalonia, but then I moved to the UK and I work in animal protection in many capacities, as freelance or as an employee of animal protection organizations of all types on different issues, hunting with dogs, zoos, animal captivity, all sort of things, for decades. And I'm specialized in animal behavior, but I kind of been covered many animals from primates to insects to bulls. And I've been vegan for more than 20 years now. And I am working as a writer now. I write on issues of veganism for several clients. So I'm freelance. And I'm a writer because I wrote a book called Ethical Vegan, a personal and political journey to change the world. And that book came from my experience of having won a legal case. And that's what I'm most known for being part of of being responsible of the recognition of ethical veganism as a protected philosophical belief in the UK. So that's what the talk is going to be about. So I'll start and I will use a presentation. So I'm going to be sharing it. Hold on a sec. Share screen. Here it is. Oh, host disable participant screen sharing. Please enable that if you can, Roger.
I need to enable your
sharing screen.
Yeah. Okay, people, talk to me about how I do that, please.
Hi, Carol.
Yeah, I've got security participants chat share screen. Oh, maybe that's the thing.
Share screen, yeah, that's what you need.
No, I might have done it, Jordi. Do you want to try again?
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. Can you see this?
Yes, that's good.
Right. Let me start the show then.
No,
right. Okay. This is me, and this is the talk. So it's going to be mostly about Great Britain. We'll talk about Northern Ireland and the Republican Ireland, but my case was in Great Britain. I've been in Great Britain and in the UK most of my life, and that's what I know most about. But I also will cover Northern Ireland and very, very quick at the end, and the Republic of Ireland as well. So why me? So why I'm giving you this talk here? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert in law. I have no degree in law. Well, I just happen to be involved in a legal case that have made waves around the world on the issue of vegan rights. And it kind of always been quite knowledgeable on legal issues, even if I was not a lawyer, because I was involved in many prosecutions. I've been an undercover investigator for some time, and I was trying to prosecute the people I was investigating. And so I kind of developed an understanding of how law works and evidence gathering, all these sort of things. So although I'm not a lawyer, and you should not take any of the things I'm going to be saying today as legal advice or coming from a lawyer, I have some knowledge on this. But everything started in April 2018. As you can see with the headlines, it had to do with pensions, not with food, but with pensions. At the time, I was working for the League Against Cruel Sports as the head of policy and research. And I had been hired with them 10 years before. So I rejoined them again in 2016 as head of policy and research. And when you join any organization in the UK, by law now, you have to be auto-enrolled into a pension fund. And a pension fund chosen by the employer. And of course I did. And because I'm a vegan, I always check everything. I read all the labels. And I wanted to know where this pension fund was investing into, because they all invest into something. And I was immediately surprised to see that the name was different than the pension fund they had 10 years before. 10 years before, there was the label ethical, the term ethical in the name. And this time it wasn't there. So I really contacted the pension provider, and I checked. And I was shocked to realize that I was investing in the worst possible companies I could imagine. Petrol companies, tobacco companies, and pharmaceutical companies that test on animals. And I was very surprised because that was an animal protection organization, an anti-hunting organization. Although it was an animal welfare organization instead of an animal rights, I would expect more. But that's what happened. So I immediately complained to my bosses. And they blamed previous management, saying they didn't know how that happened, but they would change it. So then I asked, please don't include my contributions, I think it was 6% of my salary, to this fund until you solve it, because I don't want any of my money to go to vivisection. I said, yeah, we'll do that. But months passed and even a year passed, and nothing was happening. And I checked, and they had not stopped my contributions. They contributed against my wishes to this pension fund. The management had changed several times. They were replaced by others due to illness and other things. I keep complaining to some people. Eventually, in February 2018, I changed the pension fund myself, because you can change it if you don't like the one that the employer gives you. I wanted everyone to have the good one, the ethical one, but since that was not happening, I changed mine. And I communicated to my colleagues, many of them were vegan too, that what I had learned about this pension problem, and that I had changed the pension fund, and and if they wanted to do it, they could do it as well. And because of these communications, I was fired for gross misconduct. And I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. That's quite unfair. I had no other choice. I'm an ethical vegan. I have to avoid these animal exploitation options if I have an option that is possible, and ethical pension funds exist. And I am obliged to tell my colleagues, my vegan friends, to help to do the same if they want to do so, because that's what we do. We help each other. So I thought, that's unfair. I'm being fired because I'm an ethical vegan. So I'm going to take you to the employment tribunal. And that's what I did. I had this case, Casamitjana versus League Against Sport. This is a number. And essentially, my claim, this is paraphrasing it, was that I am an ethical vegan who was dismissed by an animal welfare charity after I blew the whistle that the pension fund was being invested in companies involved in animal testing. As a result of my protected disclosures, I suffered a series of detriments, including my dismissal, which I claim was discriminatory on the grounds of my philosophical belief in ethical veganism. And I thought that would be straightforward, because I thought veganism must be protected. And then obviously I contacted my lawyers. I discovered that it wasn't, that not that it believe there could be or there should be, that there had not been a case confirm it. And I had to go through a process to be the first person claiming veganism as a protected belief. And everyone that wants to claim for a particular belief that had been not tested before, it has to go to a specific process. That process, essentially, it has to be done in the employment tribunal, and it happens in a pre-hearing, a hearing where the only issue was to determine whether the belief I claimed was protected was indeed protected under the Quality Act 2004. And if the judge said yes, and he had to check a series of conditions that had to, all of them be fulfilled to be protected, and if the judge said yes, then my case would continue in what is called the full merits hearing. And that's where I would be, the judge would be assessing whether I was discriminated because of that belief or I was fired for other reasons. So I had to go through this pre-hearing phase that beliefs that have been already protected or religions don't have to go through. And in this pre-hearing phase, these two things had to happen. First, the judge had to check that ethical veganism fulfill all the conditions of the protected philosophical belief under the Quality Act 2010, and that I was indeed a genuine ethical vegan, that I didn't make it up in order to get compensated. I've been using this term ethical veganism because that's how my claim was worded. And what do I mean with that? I mean, many of you already know this. This word is not mine. It was already being used in the 1980s. And it was used as a response of people saying that they were vegans, but the only thing they did about veganism was have a vegan diet. They claimed they were vegans, and the genuine vegans started to say, well, we need to have an adjective to tell us apart from these. And that's what ethical veganism means a proper vegan, somebody that follows the definition, the official definition of the Vegan Society, created initially in 1944 and eventually finalized in 1988, which is the one that still we use today. So an ethical vegan is a proper vegan or an orthodox vegan or a true vegan or whatever you want to call it, but is basically somebody that follows to the full the definition of the Vegan Society. Means a philosophy that seeks to exclude as far as possible and practicable all forms of animal exploitation and cruelty, not just for food. So what has to happen in that pre-hearing is that the judge had to use a series of criteria that were already set up in a previous case in the Employment Appeal Tribunals, which is a higher court case, and it has precedent. Anything that they decide then becomes precedent for all the others. And this is the Granger test. It's called the Granger test because the Granger was the claimant. It was to do with environment. He was somebody that believed in man-made global warming and had been discriminated because of that belief. That went to court, eventually went to an appeal, and the appeal tribunal set up these 5 conditions that now all beliefs have to be fulfilling, all of them. I'm going to read them. The first is has to be a genuinely held belief. It's going to be just something that you just for the purpose of the trial or occasionally believe about. Second, has to be a belief and not an opinion or viewpoint based on the present state of information available. It's going to be something that changes when you got more data. It has to be properly in your mind. Third, be a belief as to a weighty and substantial aspect of human life and behavior. And that's important. That means it cannot be something trivial or minor. It has to be affecting people's life in a substantial way. The fourth is attain a certain level of cogency, seriousness, cohesion, and importance. And this is important because that qualifies the belief. It says some beliefs are not cogent enough or serious enough to be protected. So it gives a qualification. And the fifth one, which is in fact 3 of them all put together, and the 3 components of the fifth one have to be fulfilled, says that it has to be worthy of respect in a democratic society and not incompatible with human dignity or in conflict with the fundamental rights of others. And this one is the one that many of the bad beliefs, the ones that are abusing other people, are rejected through that one because they don't fulfill it. So ethical veganism had to rule each and every of these beliefs. So I had to gather evidence in my case to persuade the judge that that would be the case. So there was an interesting case before mine, though, which is interesting to look, which is the Conisbee versus Crossley Farms Limited, because that was about vegetarianism. And it happened to be the exact same judge, Judge Postel, who ruled this one few months before mine. So it was good for me to have an idea which kind of judge would it be when I read this judgment. And the interesting thing about this one is that he rejected vegetarianism. So he said the vegetarianism is not a protected philosophical belief under the Equality Act. And he said that the condition of being cogent enough is the one that failed. So he didn't consider vegetarianism as cogent enough because there were vegetarians for many reasons and they had nothing to do with beliefs or ethics, etc. But he also, in the same breath, he kind of make a comment that says more or less, it's not like the vegans that they believe these things. So, but he make a passing comment referring to the vegans as these guys are kind of hardcore compared with the vegetarians that are more loose. And that made me think, oh, he actually understands the difference between vegans and vegetarians. So that was good news for me. And the pre-hearing happened the 2nd and the 3rd of January 2020 in Norwich. Employment Tribunal. Why Norwich? Because that was the only available. I didn't work in Norwich. I work in Horsham, in Godalming, and I live in London. But there's such a queue of people wanting to get to Employment Tribunal that sometimes you just need to get to the tribunal and it's free. That's why the one I had to go. And it works. So the judge says, yes, veganism is indeed a protected philosophical belief under the Equality Act. And the media went crazy. I already contacted the media months before because I could not pay my lawyer, so I had to crowdfund. And so therefore I had to go public and let people know about my case, and I drew the attention of media all over the world. So by the time I went to the pre-hearing, the whole place was full of media outside with cameras. It was completely packed up with journalists in the room. And the judge and the judge says yes, and he went everywhere. So all the newspapers, you can see here, my face was in next day in all the newspapers in the UK, and also obviously TV, and that's the BBC, and radio, all the radios, everywhere. That's in Switzerland, that's in Portugal, that's in New Zealand, that's in Korea. And of course, this is an article from Ireland, which they were also interested about my case. Last time I checked, which was a few years ago, it was in 1,467 websites talking about my case in more than 60 countries. So huge interest. And who achieved this? Well, this is the team. I am here on the right. On my right, that's my solicitor, Chris Milson. On his right, that's my, on my right, that's my barrister, Chris Milton. On his right, that's my solicitor, Peter Daly. And the other two are witnesses, expert witnesses I produced for my case, Dr. Jeanette Rowley from the Vegan Society and Professor Mark McMahon from Oxford University. The Vegan Society did help me a lot, not just providing me a witness, but also helping me economically in the pre-hearing, only in the pre-hearing, not my full merits hearing. But yeah, I was crowdfunding, but I didn't really manage to get all the money for the pre-hearing, but they just managed to save me and get me what I needed, the rest. So which laws are involved in that decision? Well, there are many laws. The Quality Act is the one that could rule at the time, but there are many laws behind that one that could explain why veganism is a protected belief, or it should be a protected belief. And it all starts with the bigger general universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the one that really starts with the whole thing, because it uses this term freedom of thought. Article 18 says everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religious belief and freedom either alone or in community with others and in public or private to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. So it's generally known as the freedom of conscience. And this automatically is kind of what led to the European Convention of Human Rights, which covers not just the European Union, as many people think, covers all the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is more countries than just the European Union, including the UK. So the fact that the UK now is not part of the European Union doesn't matter, because it's still part of the European Convention of Human Rights of the Council of Europe, which it says more or less the same thing. In Article 9, everybody has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. So Article 9 is the one that counts. It also has an Article 14, says the prohibition of discriminations, and it says that the employment so the enjoyment of the rights and freedoms set for this convention shall be secured without discrimination on any grounds such as race, etc., and including religion. It doesn't specifically use the word belief in this one, but it does in the Article 9. Then all these has to be translated into national laws. In the UK, use the Human Rights Act 1998 to make that explicit, that European Convention of Human Rights, which deals essentially with the obligations of the state on the citizens. So this is what the state have to do. In this case, have to an obligation to be sure that people have freedom of belief. And in this case would be veganism. I don't say would be veganism because the couple of things happened that already suggested that veganism was included. One is that the UK Equalities and Human Rights Commission, which is a group of people that checks that all the human rights legislation are properly applied and the European legislation are properly applied, they already mentioned that veganism obviously was one of these beliefs, and they have the word veganism as an example in their guidance. So that's a good thing. But also there was a case in 1993, H versus United Kingdom, of a prisoner, a vegan prisoner that didn't want to work in the printing part of the prison because he objected to the ink being tested on animals. He ended up in the European Convention of Human Rights against the United Kingdom for forcing him to do so. And both the United Kingdom government and the court, the European Court of Human Rights, accepted the veganism was part, although the case didn't progress because there are exceptions, and in the case it was considered an exception was valid. They did kind of accept it, they didn't contest it. Therefore, these two facts make everybody understand that from the point of view of Human Rights Act, veganism is part of is protected. So the state has an obligation not to discriminate to vegans for their belief. But that's a state. That doesn't mean a company, doesn't mean an employer. That's a state, because that's what the Human Rights Act does. We need something else to cover everyone. And that's the Equality Act 2010. That's the one that covers everyone, the obligation for everyone, employers, the landlords, and the state as well. So that cannot happen until my case. And in my case, nobody had tried veganism as a protected belief in an Equality Act. So that's the one that was ruled in my case. And the Equality Act has these 9 protected characteristics. One of them is religion or belief, and explicitly uses the word belief. And it says the belief means any religion or philosophical belief, and the reference of a belief includes a reference to lack of belief. So it's the first time they uses this term, philosophical belief. What does it mean? So belief is a conviction, is something to be certain about something. It's not the same than the verb to believe that people use as saying, I have an opinion about something. This is the noun. The noun belief means a conviction. You're certain about something. Why? For different reasons. If you have a religious belief, then you're certain either because of faith or the trust in religious leaders or scriptures or religious dogma or institutionalized superstition. But if you have a philosophical belief, then you're convinced about something is true or something happened because of logic or analysis of evidence or intellectual speculation or ethical consideration. So they all believe treated equally in the Equality Act. Doesn't matter why you believe something, whether it is for religious reasons or philosophical reasons, that convictions is protected. So essentially what it means is, in practical terms, that a philosophical belief means a non-religious belief, because a non-religious belief, the religions are already protected automatically. So anything that is non-religious should be protected. But in order to determine which are the beliefs that deserve protection, that system of a pre-hearing with a judge checking the Granger test have to happen with all the philosophical belief. Doesn't need to happen with religious beliefs that are automatically protected. Protected from what? Well, here on the left is what the Equality Act protects from: discrimination, harassment, and victimization. Discrimination means be treated differently than others. And there are 2 types, direct and indirect. Direct discrimination is when you believe directly is being discriminated. For instance, a pub that says vegans not welcome, that sign in a pub, which actually I saw before in my case, I saw one sign like that in a pub. And that would be an unlawful now, a sign, because that would be direct discrimination, naming vegans, they saying, we don't want vegans like you. Indirect discrimination is when something, a rule or policy that looks like neutral, looks like there is no really discriminating against anyone. In fact, it is discriminating because it affects negatively a particular group, even if it's not explicitly said so. For instance, a policy of saying we're only going to serve cow's milk, but not plant-based milk, that doesn't mention vegans in itself, but obviously affects negatively all vegans. So that would be indirect discrimination. Harassment is being treated, receiving a behavior that is unwelcome, being offended by something, being treated badly, feeling offended or bad about something because of a policy or what people said, etc. And victimization is when you complain either about harassment or discrimination, and because you complain, you've been victimized. Something bad happened to you as a consequence of your complaints. So when you have a protected characteristic under the Equality Act, you're protected from all these 3 things. In where? In the workplace, as an employer or employee, or even between members of your work, in premises relationships like landlords and tenants, and in the provision of service, both private and public. But not all these 3 protection apply to all of these. Discrimination, yes, discrimination applies to workplace, premises, schools, everything, and services, but harassment and victimization only in the workplace, not in the provision of service. Although in practice, every time that you have a harassment or victimization case, you can easily build it up as a discrimination case as well. So in practice, it does cover, you can make it cover all. But the Equality Act only covers Great Britain, England, Wales, and Scotland. So Northern Ireland is not covered by that. Now, it's important to realize that this does not mean that there is a crime in the UK to to harass a vegan for being vegan. This headline here is wrong. Veganism becomes protected philosophical belief. Mocking vegans may constitute a crime. It's wrong because the Equality Act is not a criminal law. It's a civil law. So you can sue somebody for discriminate you, but you cannot call the police and say, I've been harassed, or unless the harassment is violent or breaches other laws. But in itself, it's not listed veganism as a hate crime. There are many issues like religion and races that are also, although they are part of the Equality Act, they're also listed as the police list of hate crimes, so they might become hate crime. Veganism is not one of them. So veganism has not become a hate crime issue in the UK yet, but it could if there are many cases the police decides to include it. So what did the judge say? Well, what's quite interesting is normally the judges in employment tribunals, they write the judgment in a written judgment, it's called, and they send it to you months or weeks or after hearing. But in this case, it was unusual because the judgment was given the same day. It was 2 days, the 2nd and 3rd of January. And the first day, there was no witnesses. There were no witnesses giving testimony because the judge needed to read my bundle. I produced 1,200 pages of evidence, and the judge needed an entire day to read them all. So the second day had already read everything. So by the time that we were giving testimony, he didn't ask any question. Nobody asked any question. And he said, look, I already know. I already decided. I can give you a summary judgment, and then I can send you the whole thing later on. And he did the summary judgment. He was very aware there was many press around, so he knew it was public interest. And he said, yes, I'm overwhelmingly convinced that veganism is a protected belief. And then he sent the 28 pages with detailed explanation. He used this 13 paragraph to talk about the definition of veganism. And that's important because in the 16th paragraph, when he says the philosophy defined by the vegan society is clearly the one that the claimant it's me, adheres to, and thus constitute the basis of his philosophical belief acting as a moral framework. What essentially means is that it's not just my belief that being protected, it's the belief that I share with all ethical vegans. Because I don't have a special definition of veganism, I use the standard official definition of veganism. And the judge recognized that. It said everybody else that follows this definition, therefore unethical vegan, it will be equally protected than the claimant, in the case me, recognizing that I manifest this philosophy differing than others, and that doesn't matter. The way people manifest it, it doesn't matter. But if they follow the same definition, then they're following the same philosophy, they're all protected. And that's why my case affected all vegans, not just me. And that's the last part of his conclusion that says, I am therefore satisfied, and I find it easy to conclude that there is overwhelming evidence before me that ethical veganism is capable of being a philosophical belief and thus a protected characteristic under the Equality Act 2010. So he used this term overwhelmingly, and each of the 5 conditions that had to be fulfilled, they were all overwhelmingly proven. So it was a very strong case. What happened with my full merits hearing? Well, that continued in February and March. It was a 10-day trial, and in the 5th day we settled in my favor. So I was compensated economically. The league changed the pension fund into an ethical pension fund. They said I had done nothing wrong in my communication, so anything I asked for happened. So it was a victory for me, and it was the first time that protection that had been confirmed by the judge now had been applied by another judge, because it was another hearing in another court. So it was applying the protection for the first time successfully in favor of a vegan in litigation. So it worked. And what happens is immediately a publisher approached me and said, you need to write a book about this. And that's what I did, a book called Ethical Vegan and Personal and Political Journey to Change the World, that a part of talking about veganism and the history of veganism and how I became vegan. It kind of covers my case, my 2 years litigation of the legal case. And that led me to become the writer I am now. Because of that book, then people are contacting me to write articles and books and things like that about veganism. And that's what I do for a living at the moment. There was an interesting case very recently, though. There have been other cases now since mine where vegans have been able to benefit in court from the protection I won. But this was interesting. T. Olsen versus Willow Tower, very recent in May 2023, because that was a case where the judge says, no, you are not protected because you're not an ethical vegan. You might have a vegan diet, but you're not an ethical vegan. That's what the judge said, essentially paraphrasing this. The judge essentially said he was not persuaded that this person was an ethical vegan, and he gave the reasons why. So kind of what it kind of proves is that through these cases, you're not just veganism protected, but it clarifies that only the actual vegans that have veganism as a philosophy, not those that just have the vegan diet, are covered by this protection. Let's move to Northern Ireland now. Well, it's almost covered more or less the same legislation, obviously Universal Declaration of Human Rights and European Convention of Human Rights and the Human Rights Act all covers Northern Ireland. The Human Rights Act 1998 covers all the UK. Equality Act didn't cover all the UK, but this one does cover all the UK. But the Equality Act is different. They have different law. They have the Fair Employment and Treatment Amendment Regulation Northern Ireland 2003 Act. But essentially is the same thing because it kind of parallels totally the Equality Act in many respects. And every time there is belief protected in Great Britain, although technically that should not apply automatically to Northern Ireland, the judges that tend to kind of like accept it almost as is the case. And you can see here that the Equality Commission of Northern Ireland that give guidance, they do have a text saying what's a protected philosophical belief in the bottom, and it mentions veganism. So they do clearly say that veganism is covered by Northern Ireland, even if it's not covered by the Equality Act, but it's covered by the Northern Irish equality legislation. So that's covered. What about the Republic of Ireland? Well, this is a bit different. The top is the same, the Universal Declarations of Human Rights, and in particular the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, which is one of the ways that is manifested. That covers it because international. The European Convention of Human Rights as well, but because the island is part of the European Union, it has more things that apply to the island, to Republic Island, than to Great Britain and the UK, because it has the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union that more or less kind of expresses what the European Convention of Human Rights is. So Ireland created as well a Human Rights Act, which is the Human Rights Act 2003 instead of 1998 in the UK. But it does the same thing. It covers what the state, the obligations of the state over the citizens, and is based on the same law. So therefore, that law that uses the term beliefs or freedom of thought. In terms of Equality Act, the Council of Directive 2000 of the European Union makes all members of the European Union to have equality legislation, and the island has these two laws that covers it: the Employment Equality Act 1998, 2015, and the Equal Status Act 2000, 2015, because they cover slightly different things. The Employment Act only covers the equality issues on employment, as the title says, while the Equality Status Act covers the rest, the provision of services, etc. So basically, these two laws do more or less the same that the Equality Act does in a single law. And it does cover really more or less the hand. It covers the discrimination, direct and indirect harassment and victimization, and also altogether combined the workplace, the premises, the education, and the provisions of services, private and public. But this is the big difference. The big difference is that the word philosophical beliefs is not in the Irish law or any similar words such as creed or belief or etc. It just uses religion. So the legislation does not expressly refers to non-religious belief. And you can see this image here that's from the islands of the government, and it says at the bottom religion, but doesn't say belief or anything else. And that has made many commentators say what that means that it's not covered as in the UK because it only covers religion, which is an open question. It hasn't been resolved, although there are arguments that it should be covered because the European Convention of Human Rights is the one that makes the UK to use the word philosophical belief. And it's somehow wrong that many people say that the Irish legislation didn't include it because it should have. It should have because the directive from Europe says that this covers more than religion. And there was like an error of only mentioned religion. And so therefore the court should interpret it as meaning religion and other beliefs, even if only mentions religion. And also we have the constitution of the Irish constitution, Article 44.2.1 states that freedom of conscience and the free possession of practice and religions are subject to public order and morality guaranteed to every citizen. He uses this term conscience, which why does he mention that if he already says and practice of religion? It's because it covers a bit more than somebody would say. So it seems that if the Constitution does cover it and the European law suggested it should be applied, even if the word philosophical belief or creed or similar is not in itself in the equality legislation. But we don't know until you test it. And there is the need of a discrimination case like mine, in which somebody claims that it should be protected and the courts have to say what. I don't know if there hasn't been any. I'm not aware of any. I don't know that much about various cases, but I don't believe it is because you would have probably read it. But if you know, let me know. But the outcome could be either that the person, the case at the lower level says, no, because the word philosophical belief or belief is not in the law, we reject your case, and then this is taken to a higher court, an appeals court that ends up in the European courts, and the European court says, oh, you did not apply the directive correctly, you should have added religion. So now reprimands the Irish government and asks them to modify the law. That could be an outcome, possible outcome. The other outcome could have been that, yeah, at the lower level, the judges said, yeah, of course, it must imply also philosophical belief because this is based in European law that uses this wider perception. And this is it. So thank you very much. And I was clear enough. I can answer any question, of course. Let me stop sharing.
Wow. Now I've got an echo coming in here. Hang on a second. Let me just do this.
You getting feedback there?
Yeah, it should have gone now, I think.
Yeah, it's gone.
Well, Jordi, that was very, very thorough and really enjoyable. I've got a million questions, but I'm sure that Maureen has probably got a million more. But I saw Maureen put a comment up about that last thing about we need an Irish case. So somebody's got to be working for an unethical company. That's not going to be hard, is it? But Maureen said the Irish Human Rights and Equalities Commission has said informally that veganism is a protected belief.
Yeah, a few years ago. Thanks very much, Jordi. That was an absolutely fantastic talk. I'm a lawyer and a vegan, and I'm setting up the first course on animal law in my university in Galway, starting in January. So your case will feature in that, unusually, because I think a lot of courses on animal law, they don't cover the issue of what people eat. You know, it's sort of left aside. So that is going in there. So, but yeah, I had an acquaintance who contacted the Irish Human Rights and Equalities Commission, and they're kind of the guardian of the Equalities Acts. And they have said that veganism is a protected belief. I mean, there are cases that recognize vegetarianism going back to the late 19th century in Ireland, and it would likely be recognized in the same category. Like the Conisbee case was very controversial because there's a long history of recognition of vegetarianism in courts. And I think the judge was wrong on that. And there were plans to appeal it, but then I think COVID got in the way and stuff, and I don't think that that's progressed. So yeah, I just wanted to make that comment.
Did I say anything wrong? No, you're a lawyer, you can tell me.
Oh, not at all. No, absolutely perfect.
Cool. So I'm very aware that I'm not a lawyer every time I talk about these things because people make assumptions, and it's a big deal when you pretend to be a lawyer and you're not. So I'm glad I covered well the Irish bit. There was a bit I didn't know much, so I had to kind of research that one recently. So.
No, that's absolutely perfect. But yeah, I just wanted to add that vegetarianism, well, because veganism would be classified in the same way, has been mentioned in lots and lots of court cases by high-ranking judges as examples of protected belief, and they never had any problem with it. So, you know, that's just an additional thing that because I suppose one of the worrying things about the rhetoric in the UK is when they start talking about pulling out of the Convention on Human Rights,
Yeah.
where that would actually leave a whole host of ethical beliefs. And like it's a very interesting terrain in the way in which it's being expanded, you know, to cover environmental beliefs and stuff like that. There is always also a resort to the courts, because rights can come from the common law. They don't even need a statutory footing. And that case that I mentioned from the late 19th century, it was the Irish Court of Appeal before we were independent, or like before we, before independence and before partition, in which the judges, they recognised the leaving of a gift to the Manchester and London vegetarian societies as a charitable purpose. So they didn't have any statutory or legislative grounds on which to make that decision. So even if you were to take away all the legislation, judges can still recognise our rights. And I think that that's very, very heartening. You know?
Am I right in believing that in recent years, there's been, for lack of a better word, a secularization of some legislation, moving away to the religion component and opening further than religion, and getting rid of blasphemy laws and all these sort of things, that all that would open even wider the possibility of accepting philosophical beliefs as at the same level of religious protection?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's a broadening. I mean, I've even talked to people who would have had a very traditional attitude towards, towards farming and stuff like that. A former Minister for Agriculture. I did an interview with him about a year ago, and you know, he would have been very, very hardline against vegetarianism and veganism. Going back 20 years ago, he was Minister for Agriculture. And when I did the interview with him, he was very, very soft indeed. And it turns out his daughter lives in London and she's clearly a vegan, and he's clearly been converted. So things are changing all the time. The other thing that was a very interesting question you raised, because I actually think that an awful lot of the move towards the recognition of animal rights, it kind of filtered through India, through the empire. And so these beliefs, they're not necessarily purely secular. I mean, you say yourself that you're influenced by ahimsa.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
when I read your case, I'm thinking actually there's a kind of a lacuna between religion and belief of spirituality, because I think that veganism for some people, it's not just a kind of a secular belief that, okay, it's what I do in this world and that's the end of it. It's got deeper roots, you know?
Yeah, there is an interesting case that's happening right now in Ottawa in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
There's a firefighter that was a vegan firefighter that was not provided food while he was fighting fires because it was vegan, and he took the court. It took a long time because of COVID, and still happening right now. But the interesting thing about Ottawa law, they have the equivalent legislation. They don't use philosophical belief. They use this word creed. And the creed, that's the polemic they have, because some people define it as synonymous with religious, others as a less than religious. Some say there has to be some otherworldly aspect of a creed, others they don't. So that's the heart of the discussion at the moment in Ottawa, is whether that creed would include veganism. But they don't have philosophical belief that is clearly a non-religious, completely non-religious case. They use this creed as somewhere in between. So it might be countries that they have the word creed, doesn't mean that they are out of the picture. If Canada is successful, that you could argue both from a philosophical belief and a creed, the veganism should be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've got this mental picture now of a vegan firefighter reaching for a vegan sandwich while on top of the ladder or something like that. Now, I want to ask a technical question, Dennis, if I may, which is, I'm still recording. Are we okay to record the Q&A, or should I stop or continue? We're okay to okay.
Good,
So
good to go.
okay, so the way it goes then, folks, is if you've got a point to make, I think you can raise your little flag and I'll see it and call you in, and then it'll be a question of unmuting yourself. I don't think you necessarily need to be on camera, so totally up to you. So are there any more questions?
Yeah, where is the hand symbol? Sorry.
I think it goes to reactions and it says raise hand. Yeah. So you click on reactions and it says raise hand. Yeah. It's actually, yeah, it's not very useful, that, in the sense that it's not very obvious, is it? Yeah. Well, I've got a couple of questions. Do you want to jump in first, Dennis? You've always got something to say.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Jordi. That was really fascinating. I very much enjoyed it, and my mind is working overtime here. I'm wondering, can we open up a new front of activism through the course, vegan rights in the workplace? And I think the Extinction Rebellion have been very successful in attacking banks and financial institutions. I think that's something us vegans could look at now through this this law. I think it opens up the possibility anyway. I'm not a law person, I'm not a technical person, but I think there's an opportunity there. And I want to thank you so much. This will go far and wide now when we get the recording back out again. Thank you very much, Jordi.
That's okay. Most people don't know the effects of my legal case. And because COVID kind of kicked in immediately after my case, there was lots of momentum in the media. But there's been many things happened because of my case. For instance, the firefighters in the UK now, they are issued automatically vegan goods if they are vegan. So before it was a big deal to, if you had to fight for it, now you got it. There were bizarre things happen. The Masons, the Freemasons in Scotland, changed their rituals to allow non-leather objects in the rituals. The week after I won the case, after centuries of traditionally using leather, just this case come immediately. They did that. There were obviously many anecdotal cases of people contacting me saying, I've been asking for soya milk in my office for years and now I got it the next day. Or my children go to school and they never got food and now they get it. So all these things were very, very interesting happening. But there were things like the army, the British Army. Now they have a vegan and vegetarian network that promotes veganism and trying to get vegans, vegan foods and all this in the food. And I've been involved with them very deeply. I was with them a few days ago, giving talks like the one I just gave you. So there are networks of vegans in departments of the government that they now have discussions about this, trying to pressure things from inside the government to something that they would never considered before. So there are effects happening. And this legislation in other countries, like all these other cases I mentioned, they often use my case as a reference. There was this a case happening in Bologna in Italy, a teacher that was vegan, and the Bologna law was quite good in the sense that the children that are vegan, they have the right to have vegan meals by the state. The state provides the meals, but not the teachers. And she thought, I'm discriminated against. She took the educational system to court and she won. And she mentioned my case. She used my case as the arguments and she won. It was just in Bologna area, but again, a legal change from my case. And all these other cases that now we discuss, and there is this one I just mentioned in the tower, but this one in Switzerland, this has gone to the European Human Rights so the higher court. There was a prisoner that was mocked for being vegan, and there's a person in France that is trying to sue the education system because she was doing a degree and she was forced to cook animal products. She said no, and he said, well, you can't pass. So now after COVID, all the things I expected would happen quite soon, now they're happening. So we might just see more of a domino effect now.
Thank you. One more thing to add, Roger, please. I want to acknowledge the part of Maureen O'Sullivan in getting this show on the road tonight. That Maureen introduced me to you in your existence, and also a friend of mine, Paul Campbell. He's in London Vegans. So thank you very much, Maureen. She's here tonight. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Yeah, one of the things that struck me when you were talking, Jordi, is has Brexit changed anything?
Well, it has changed a lot of things, but on that front, no. So it hasn't made any difference. First, because we still, the Council of Europe, we're still part of the Council of Europe. Therefore, the European Convention of Human Rights still applies to us. And also, the Equality Act will not change. That's a national law that had no effect at all. In fact, we are lucky that the Equality Act is 2010, is quite old. That means there's been time to create precedents, to create many protections of beliefs that will stay no matter what. So the fact that being outside has no effect on that. But if we do move outside to the Convention of Human Rights, which is some people are talking about, that might have an effect at that higher level. But since we already protected at the lower level, it doesn't really matter. So.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting. And I was really struck by some of the language in the talk, and I was particularly looking when all those news items came up about the victory and all that. So there was various kind of phrases: legally protected, philosophically protected, a philosophical belief that is now legally protected. So in terms of language, are we able to say then that legally veganism has been defined as a philosophy? Is that what all that means?
Well, more than that. My case has provided something. Has provided a written judgment from a judge, making a judgment about veganism the first time. That the judge says, I'm going to make a judgment about veganism. And everything he writes is the first time that legally in court somebody has made a judgment. And he says, yeah, veganism is a philosophy. So he says that because he says veganism is based on the definition of the vegan society, and because that's how I argue it. I talked about ahimsa in my many pages of evidence. So, and he mentions it. He says it's rooted in all philosophy, and he basically kind of follows my arguments in which what I said, well, it's not just a recent thing, it's well-founded, and yeah, eventually it boils down that that not just veganism has been recognized as a philosophy, but it's been recognized as a philosophy as important, as cogent, or than any religion that exists. And it's a leveler. It's not just a philosophy. It's a philosophy that in no way could be seen that is less important than Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, environmentalism, because that's what the Equality Act does. It levels everything. So it doesn't say this is more protected than that. So once you protect it at the same level. And that's why many of the articles in the paper, there was a huge interest around the world because the news were well received by people that loved the idea and well received by people that hated the idea. There was a perfect opportunity to say, look at these crazy vegans, look what they've done in England. So they all wanted to talk about it. And the ones that didn't like it, obviously they used headlines that were not precise. They said, England has made veganism a religion, which obviously is wrong. But the thing that they didn't like is the fact that we put veganism at the same level of the most precious beliefs and religions. And I think that is what is different. And that's why it's applicable anywhere, because although jurisdiction doesn't apply in other countries, the arguments are the same. There is no distinction between veganism in this country and other countries, and the philosophy and the arguments are exactly the same. So it's completely applicable. My 1,200 pages of evidence can be given in another court, and it still work, most of them. Part of it is just my receipts to show that I'm vegan, but you remove my receipts, all the arguments stand everywhere.
This is really fascinating stuff. I suppose the power of what Maureen was talking about, common law, or what Stephen Wise said, a judge-made law, I think, in Rat in the Cage, and that's what we're talking about. So it sets a precedent, and then people can refer to it, and that becomes, So I suppose
just let me add this: the employment tribunal is a lower level court. That means it doesn't set a legal precedent in the sense that it's not a higher court. That higher court set legal precedent, but there hasn't been any case where an employment tribunal has accepted a belief, and then others. Judges have rejected that one. So it's kind of a general rule now that if one employment tribunal accepted, everybody follows it, unless it's appealed. And if it's appealed, go higher. My case wasn't appealed, therefore that stays. But it's a lower court. But the term is called a persuasive legal argument. That's the term, persuasive legal argument, which is transnational. So because he says overwhelmingly convinced, and he argued in his statement, the judge, very well in each of the points, is impossible to argue against it in a way. So that what it becomes a persuasive legal argument by a judge, and that works everywhere.
Yeah, well, it's weird, isn't it? It turns out that the league, having terrible investments, ended up doing a real big favor for the vegan community in the end. But that's a weird thing. So, final one from me is you mentioned this recent case, and you then said ethical vegan versus dietary vegan or plant-based diet, and so your case must have got you embroiled in that kind of. So, are you in favor of making a differentiation between plant-based people and ethical vegans?
Yes, for practical reasons only. So for me, an ethical vegan is a vegan, because that's the definition. But I cannot deny that most people don't see it this way. Most people use the word vegan meaning the diet. And I think the use of the word ethical from the ones that started using it in the 80s and myself, the reason we use it is to clarify, not to be lumped together with those. So it's a practical reason that we're forced by the fact that the word's been corrupted in a way. But we haven't corrupted the concept. It's the same thing that a Jewish person might say, I'm an Orthodox Jewish, just to make clear that it's different than other Jewish person. Or these words that you add, these adjectives you add, they don't change the concept. They just clarify it to prevent people to get confused. For that purpose, I find it useful. So if I say ethical vegan, people know what I mean, and I don't have to go back and explain the whole thing. But I'm not saying an ethical vegan is something different than the proper vegan. I'm saying that we are the proper vegans, so are the other ones that use improperly the word.
Yeah, Linda is saying this is such an advance, and then how many judges will accept the development? And Maureen answered saying judges generally follow precedent, so that's a pretty good. And there's a final one. The fact that they have very different. That's you, Maureen, again. Okay, there is respect for others on the bench. Okay, so yeah, I mean, like to be honest, until today, I didn't kind of really appreciate how far-reaching your case has been. To be honest, it's really impressive.
To be honest, I don't know any other vegan story that has traveled that far. And I think it was the perfect storm in many reasons. So as a story worked very well, David versus Goliath, it had all the elements that make a good story to talk. But I right now, and I read a lot of articles about veganism all over the place to write my articles. And I don't see any that has covered wider. There were places, Bosnia, places that probably is the first article about veganism ever published. And of course, the interesting thing is many people interviewed and asked me about ethical veganism because they never heard about that. And I was the first time that I was able to explain in the media that veganism is more than a diet.
Yeah,
they never heard about it. So I had a perfect opportunity. In my case, had nothing to do with food, to talk about what real veganism is. So it gave me an opportunity to reach. I've been doing vegan outreach before. In my case, I will never catch up with the amount of outreach I did with the first 2 or 3 months of doing interviews. It was even bizarre things. There was a pastor of a evangelist church in Oklahoma that he happened to record his sermon and put it in YouTube, and my search engine found it, and he dedicated an entire sermon about my case in the middle of a evangelist church in Oklahoma, because he was amazed that the English had done this. He had a whole talk about, look how these secular people are taking over religion type of thing. So it went so far in the most unlikely places, like the Freemasons, that I think that really is what made me realize the responsibility I had to succeed. And had I failed, how many people would get.
Oh, we'd be throwing rocks at you by now, Jordi, if
Exactly.
we'd have failed. So,
Yeah.
right. So I think I've said enough. Is there any more for any more, or are we going to bring this to a conclusion? Okay.
A quote from Shakespeare, mightn't be exact, comes to mind for tonight and the revelations here. An opportunity taken at the tide leads on to greater things. So it's a really breakthrough tonight. Thank you, Jordi. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for being here.
Thank you very much.
Well, in that case, I'm going to finish off with a quote from Spike Milligan. I like chips in brown gravy. So, right. So I'm going to thank you once again, Jordi. I'm going to stop the recording, and then we can disappear if I can work out how to do it. And then where are we? I've got end. Should be stop recording somewhere, shouldn't they? Ah, there.